September 1944. The German army, overrun in Normandy, nearly destroyed at the Falaise Pocket, driven headlong through France and Belgium, is in full retreat. Streaming back to Germany in disorder, hoping perhaps for a chance to regroup and recover in the relative safety of the Siegfried Line, a series of strong fortifications on the Franco-German border, the German army's last line of defense and last chance of stopping the Western Allies short of the industrial heartland of the Rhine River Valley in Germany. The Western Allies, triumphant, are outstripping their supply lines. French Channel ports are largely in German hands, such as Dunkirk, or are wrecked. French infrastructure is wrecked from the massive bombing campaign which preceded the Normandy invasions. The ability to supply the massive war effort depends on thousands of trucks driving from Cherbourg and the Normandy beaches, hundreds of miles to the front. Every mile the Allies move toward Germany is a mile further from their base of supplies. By September, the Allies are consuming 5 gallons of fuel for every one which the truck convoys, nicknamed the Red Ball Express, deliver to the front. Every mile the Allies advance requires more and more trucks to provide the basic necessities for their offensive to continue. To meet this increasing and insatiable demand, General Eisenhower is stripping infantry divisions of all of their trucks. Additionally, these infantry divisions are leaving behind their artillery, which is carried by truck. They're leaving behind their heavy artillery, even their medium artillery, stripping the divisions down to the bare necessities in order to keep the pressure on the Germans, in order to keep driving on Germany, in an attempt to prevent the Germans from being able to rally and regroup. Nonetheless, by September, the Allied advance is beginning to break down. There simply isn't enough fuel coming in. There simply aren't enough resources to keep the massive Allied war effort moving forward in anything but a stopgap fashion. At this time, Bernard Montgomery, commander of British forces, comes to General Eisenhower with a plan. Divert supplies away from the American forces in the south to ensure that the British Army in the north has sufficient supplies for an offensive. Land 3 airborne divisions at key bridges across Holland, break through the German front, racing to and over these liberated bridges and across the final one, which will lead the British armored column into the heart of Germany, outflanking the Siegfried Line to the north and ending the war by Christmas. The operation would be named Market Garden, and its failure would be immortalized in the book and later a movie called A Bridge Too Far. 53 years after the events of Operation Market Garden, Atomic Games would release the second game in its Close Combat series. Named after the book, A Bridge Too Far came out in 1997 and would go down in gaming history as an absolute classic. Hello everyone, I'm the Historical Gamer, and today we're going to be starting a brand new series looking at that 1997 real-time tactics game, Close Combat, A Bridge Too Far. In this series, we're going to be playing as the Allies, and we're going to see if we can do better than they did historically. We're going to be playing the Grand Campaign, the campaign that puts us in charge of the British 1st Airborne Division, the Polish Parachute Brigade, the American 101st and 82nd Airborne, as well as the ground elements of the British 30 Corps as we attempt to seize the bridges around Eindhoven, Nijmegen, and Arnhem, and build that corridor, that safe path for the British forces to move up north, cross the Rhine, and get into Germany. We will see if, in this series, we are able to outdo history. Throughout this series, we will be talking about the history of the actual operation, the lead up to the campaign itself, the aftermath of the campaign, all while also discussing my gameplay as I play through this game. This is a very challenging game. I'm not terribly good at it, so my hunch is that history will outperform us. But we'll see how things play out. I hope to keep this engaging, mixing both historical discussion and gameplay discussion. While Close Combat A Bridge Too Far came out over 20 years ago, which is absolutely crazy to think of it that way, it has recently been re-released, remastered, by Good Old Games. The rights are owned by Matrix and Slytherin, so they've republished this game through Good Old Games, who is, if you're unfamiliar with them, they're a website that, in addition to selling new games which come out, They go back at old games, relook at the code, recode things where necessary to make them run on modern operating systems. So they've made the original game. It has its full motion videos and everything like that in it from the original launch, and it functions on a Windows 10 operating system now. In the past, that used to not be possible because you can't play older than 32-bit games on modern systems, but they have gone back and done that. If you're interested, there will be a link in every one of the videos to the actual store page. I make nothing if you go and buy it. It's just strictly if this looks interesting to you. This is an old classic. This is something that many of you will be familiar with, and that's all I'll say about that. So in this first episode, we're going to be jumping right into the campaign, and we're going to be playing the Battle of the Arnhem Railroad Bridge. It's the first operation in the actual grand campaign, playing as the British. So now that we've set up this series and this video, the battle that we're going to be fighting here in the first video is the Battle of the Arnhem Rail Bridge. So in our second video, we will actually go into the history behind Market Garden in more detail than what we've already done. In this video, I'm going to talk about this first battle because I think it's an interesting one, and from a gameplay perspective. The sort of historical background to the Arnhem Rail Bridge, it's going to be hard to use gameplay and have this truly be a gameplay series and talk about the history of the operation while playing the first couple of episodes. So the history that I'm going to be talking about isn't necessarily going to match up in every one of these videos with the gameplay that you're seeing in front of you. And the reason behind that is I've got to provide sort of background and storytelling that gets us up to catching us up to what we're seeing in the game. What I will say is Close Combat 2 is a little bit repetitive in some of its battles, and what that means is you will fight on the same map multiple times, especially given sort of my tactic of moving forward as little time as possible between battles. So there's quite a few battles and whatnot and videos that we'll have to talk through things to get us up to present day, as you will. I'm going to start the history of the operation and sort of how we ended up there in more detail in the next video. In this video, I'm going to talk about, from here on out, I'm going to talk about the gameplay that you're seeing in front of you. So the Arnhem Rail Bridge is, again, it's an interesting battle. It is a challenging battle, and it is one that is often overlooked in terms of its importance when you think of Operation Market Garden. Given we haven't laid all the historical framework, I think it's important to call out that Arnhem is the third and the most northern of the cities that are a part of Operation Market Garden. You have the Americans landing at Eindhoven and Nijmegen, the first two cities that 30 Corps has to break through in Holland to come up and liberate. And then Arnhem is the prize, as they call it. Arnhem is that rail bridge over the Rhine, where if the British armor can get to Arnhem, get across the bridge, they will be into Germany, behind the Rhine River, and can turn south into the heartland of the German industry and obtain the mission's objectives of winning the war by basically putting a knife through the German industry's heart and ensuring that Germany is not able to function. Now, Arnhem being the furthest north, the focus of Arnhem typically is around the road bridge, the bridge over the Rhine River in Arnhem, the actual town itself. The battle that you're looking at here, the Arnhem Rail Bridge, is actually a bridge that is a little bit further west of the town itself. It is a railroad bridge, as you can tell by the name, which crosses the Rhine and was a secondary objective for the British forces to take and seize, and provides an escape option for the rest of the British forces. So the British are landing something like 13 miles away from Arnhem itself. We'll get into how that ended up coming about, but in essence, they're a long hike away from their objective, the road bridge in Arnhem. In one of the sort of on the route to Arnhem, there's this rail bridge. Again, it's not ideal for transporting trucks and vehicles and whatnot over the Arnhem River, or sorry, the Rhine River, because it's a rail bridge, right? It's not a road bridge. But it's still a crossing, right? It's the ability to get across the Rhine. There's nothing that would prevent a group of soldiers or perhaps even limited supplies crossing this rail bridge across the Rhine. So the bridge is important because it's much closer to the actual British landing zones around Oosterbeek, and it is a secondary way that forces coming up from the south could send reinforcements across to reinforce the British. Certainly would be able to send supplies. Not the most efficient way. You're not going to support 100,000 men on the other side of a river with just a rail bridge. Although it gives you sort of a fallback method to bring a lightly equipped airborne unit across a bridge at relatively low cost. So the Arnhem Rail Bridge is important. And it is the first battle in the British campaign in close combat too. As you can see here, I am moving my troops up toward a section called the East Wall that has some German troops. There's sort of the entrance to the rail bridge, and then there's the West Wall. That's generally where this fight unfolds. And I'm using mortars to provide support to try and hit German forces to suppress them and allow my infantry to move up. I'm taking my time and having my infantry crawl because they're really coming across open ground, and they're going to be a bit of a sitting duck here if I just try and charge them straight across the actual ground. The other thing is this battle tends to have German MG-42 machine guns, which again, moving across this open terrain would end up getting my troops slaughtered in the event of German guns being well positioned. Now, you do notice in the center bottom part of the screen, there's this timer that's currently at 1 minute 30 seconds, and it is counting down. That is the timer to which this bridge blows. Historically, as the British approached the Arnhem Rail Bridge, the Germans blew it, and essentially this bridge became sort of a non-entity because it was destroyed at the very beginning of the operation. Obviously, the intent of the British and the Americans, these paratrooper units that are trying to take these bridges intact, is if these bridges are blown, that's a failure. Again, the road bridge was the prize, but the rail bridge being blown early on really limited the British to having only one potential bridge to seize across the river because the rail bridge was blown so early in the battle. In this game, my experience is that it tends to be very challenging for you to actually seize the bridge intact. You're only given about 2 minutes. If we go on to later battles in this campaign, generally you get anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes to seize a bridge before it's detonated. It seems to me if the bridge was historically seized intact, generally you get longer. If the bridge was not historically seized, for example in the case of Saun, you get less time. And in this case, the rail bridge, you get the least amount of time of any of the bridges. Perhaps because it's the least consequential bridge in terms of being destroyed. It doesn't delay the British advance north. All it really does is prevent the British forces north of Arnhem, north of the Rhine, from being able to withdraw to safety with relative ease. If you're worrying about them withdrawing with relative ease, then you've already lost the campaign. I think, anyway. I don't think you can win by just having the rail bridge if you can't take the city bridge, although I'm not really sure. As you can see here, we've taken the east wall, so we've overrun with some loss the German infantry unit that was sort of hunkered down behind the stone wall to the east of the bridge. We have seized the entrance to the bridge, and we are now moving troops west toward the west wall. We can see we've identified one enemy MG-42 machine gun unit as our troops crawl west. We have taken some casualties, but overall I feel like my troops are in relatively good strength. The challenge is these MG-42s tend to be brutal in terms of the casualties that they inflict. So given we're already on top of the Germans, my goal here is to basically just charge them, fight them in hand-to-hand combat. An MG-42 unit is usually only 3 men, whereas our own infantry squads are much larger. So you can see there, it looks like we overran them, and we're getting the rest of our troops west. The problem is, at this point, we only have 13 seconds before the bridge is going to be blown. And the battle hasn't ended, which is a little bit surprising to me, because usually by this point, the battle would have ended. It does look like the Germans have an MG-42 unit posted in the open to the west of the west wall, which means there's another unit for us to worry about. That kind of sucks. So we're going to kind of move our mortars to try and drop fire on them. We'll take a look at the rail bridge. We'll see if it detonates here, and it does not. We were given an extra minute. So I don't know if that means the Germans tried to detonate the bridge, but because of our progress across the map, their detonation failed, or what that is. But we now have an extra minute to try and seize this bridge before it is detonated. So again, the MG42 is a death machine. If I try and charge this thing head on, in all likelihood, all that will happen is my troops will get slaughtered. So what I'm doing here is I'm moving my troops up to the west wall, this stone wall here, which would give them some cover. And then my hope, as you can see, my troops in the south really took some heavy losses. My hope is that I can just kind of pin them down, use my mortars to kill them, and defeat them in the next 40 seconds before the bridge blows. We'll see if that actually happens. My troops, I don't have as many of them in good shape as I would like. I do have some other troops that are a little bit further east, but you can see this squad, for example, is almost all either orange or red, which means they're all either very badly wounded or they're killed. I did suffer pretty hefty losses in this force. My thought for the unit that I just selected was maybe if I can run up the bridge, it'll prevent the bridge from blowing. I'm not really sure how the game decides if the bridge blows or not. All I know is that if you kill all the Germans on the map or you rout them from the map, then the bridge won't blow. If you fail to do that, generally the bridge will blow. I don't think areas on the map that you seize have any impact to that, which seems odd to me, right? Like an MG42 unit that's in sort of the middle of a field west of the bridge, when the actual entrance to the bridge, the approach to the bridge, the walls around the bridge have all been taken by the British. Did the German machine gun unit really have the detonators to the west of the bridge so that they're, just sitting there waiting to blow it? That I don't know. But you can see here our mortars are not hitting their targets. We're running out of time. We're down to 4 seconds here. It doesn't look like I'm going to kill all the enemy before the bridge blows. That timer doesn't seem to be really following a real-time countdown. But there you go. I've got another minute. So the bridge didn't blow. The Germans failed to blow it again. And I've still got to kill this machine gun, which is really rattling away, quite frequently. My mortars are shooting long, it seems like. They're overshooting every one of these things. And these rounds are landing close, but not close enough. I don't have a ton of infantry, though, so my concern is if I just rush these guys across to the open, one, they'll get slaughtered because they're MG42s, and two, if they don't kill the enemy, it's really the only fully functional squad of infantry I've got left on the map here. So they're in good cover behind a wall, but they're also kind of pinned down by this machine gun. My thought would be, let's drop some smoke in front of the Germans, and then maybe we can charge them. So if we can saturate this machine gun with smoke, I've issued the order to have one of those units drop some smoke. If I can saturate the enemy with smoke, that'll impair their field of fire. It'll prevent them from being able to effectively aim. And then at that point, once they can't shoot at me anymore, I can go ahead and charge them. I don't think I'm going to be able to get that smoke laid out fast enough to be able to effectively saturate them. You can see we've got a couple of smoke rounds that have landed, but not enough to impair and not positioned properly to impair the enemy from being able to shoot our men. We've only got about 20 seconds till the bridge timer runs out again. I don't think I'm going to be able to kill the Germans before that timer runs out. You can see there a third smoke round landed pretty well placed, almost directly on top of the Germans. It feels like their fire slackened a bit. I've got one bar or sort of Bren unit firing from the south. A single man, but he's, I think, pinning the enemy. And here you can see quite a bit of smoke now. Only about 4 seconds left before the bridge blows. I think we're almost ready to charge the Germans as this timer runs out. And we'll have to... fuck! So they blew the bridge. After 2 extensions, which I never get in the first place. They almost always blow the bridge immediately. But after 2 extensions, the bridge blows. As historically occurred, the Germans blew the rail bridge before we were able to seize it. We really did kind of blunder our time there with the 2 extra minutes. There's no reason we shouldn't have been able to take it. I should have started dropping smoke sooner rather than hoping that my mortars would take the Germans out. If I had started dropping smoke immediately on that first extension, or as soon as we identified that German MG, then I might have been able to defeat them. You can see all of the smoke around the enemy. Our troops are moving up, haven't been hit. They're doing a pretty good job, I think, of closing in. And then, ideally they come screaming through the smoke and kill the Germans and, surprise them and kill them in close quarters combat with all that smoke. There you go. The battle was won. The Germans were routed from the map. The bridge was blown, unfortunately. But our Allied progress so far in the north is now 40 out of 110. The Germans lost 22 men. We lost 16. So we lost quite a few men, but the Germans lost more. victory for us in the first battle. We'll go ahead and set a 1-hour ceasefire. We'll go ahead and save the game, and we'll move forward to the Battle of Son Town, which is going to be an American airborne battle, which we will cover in our next video. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I will let you know that our next video, while we will be fighting the Battle of Son, we will be talking about the history that led up to Market Garden. Specifically, we're going to be talking in more detail about the invasions in Normandy, the Falaise Pocket, and the drive east, which really sets up Operation Market Garden. You might say, well, what is Normandy or Falaise, however you pronounce that French town name, or the drive east have to do with Market Garden? As you may have guessed from sort of that first 5-minute intro to the series, it has everything to do with Market Garden. The decisions made there, the successes there, all played a role in setting up Operation Market Garden to be conceived, because the supply situation, which made Market Garden a appealing idea or a idea that Eisenhower was willing to consider, all comes out of those initial operations in France as a part of the invasion. So we'll talk about that in our next video in conjunction with fighting the Battle of Son Town. However, until that next video, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you enjoy the beginning of this series. And until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.